I'm Beth Pariseau, Senior News Writer at Tech Target, and this is IT Ops Query Season 2, The State of SecOps. Christopher Crowley is an independent consultant and senior instructor at the SANS Institute, who has 20 years of experience managing and securing networks. He is considered a leading expert in building a Security Operations Center, or SOC, and authored the SANS 2024 SOC Survey report in May, which focused on the top challenges facing security operations. Welcome, Christopher. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. And you can call me Chris.
Alrighty, Chris. Here we go. So, the survey report from May states that, quote, the SOC is misaligned with the organization it is intended to protect. Can you say more about that? What does that mean for SecOps?
Yeah, the idea is if it were aligned, there would be a thorough understanding of what assets it actually needed to protect. There would be interaction between the SOC and every deployment and operational capability related to IT assets, so that before anything was deployed, there was a review of the appropriate sort of controls in place. And there would be adequate resources to actually perform those sorts of investigations, development of detections, anticipation of incidents, and continuation of operations. That's what alignment would sound like. And the misalignment is not doing those things.
Wow. Why do you think that is? Another section of the survey report called The Same Old Story, that the Network Operations Center, or NOC, and SOC aren't integrated. Why do you think that is, and what challenges does that present?
I have an opinion on that based on my experience. And it's more about the story of cybersecurity as a thing. I first started dealing with intrusions in networks something like 20 years ago. Right? At the time that I was dealing with these intrusions, I was a systems administrator. I did Unix systems administration. The place I was working at that time, my first real true security incident handling, was really around systems administration for AIX.
Wow.
Some Sun Solaris stuff. I was dealing with, to a lesser degree, HPUX and SGI operating systems. What we did was to make sure that they were up and running and operational. And when people started breaking into them, we weren't ready for that. So this is my personal experience, but it's also the experience globally, I think, for a lot of organizations. And then what we did was we took cybersecurity out of IT operations, which it needed to be taken out because we needed to develop the skills, capabilities, technologies in order to be able to do those things. Good. And now we have separation, we have alternate budgets, all these other things. But when you have that sort of separation, you have resources with vying contentions. And so you end up with a situation where you have a team, say a network operations team, and you might call that any number of different things within your organization, who's supposed to be keeping the lights on, proverbially. And then you have another team that's funded through different channels, which has a different objective. That's one tremendous aspect of why there's a discrepancy between the teams, why they don't cooperate. They might have different reporting lines with different objectives and so on. The other thing that I want to talk about, and again, it's sort of a big thought, prevailing thing about how this goes, is every information system as deployed is broken in ways that we don't really understand yet.
True.
And I would cite Microsoft's monthly Patch Tuesday as justification for that opinion.
Absolutely.
So we keep fixing it. It's already deployed and running, though.
Yeah.
And so that crush of work on an ongoing basis means that we don't have resources to do all this stuff. So what do? Well, we do what we can. And if I'm supposed to do one thing and you're supposed to do something else, then we're each doing what we can with the resources and time and knowledge and capabilities, technology that we have.
Yeah. In the report, you called it the same old story. You're not the only expert that I've heard say it's sort of the more things change, the more they stay the same. But in the meantime, software is kind of eating the world, and it's become such a crucial part of our daily lives. Why do you think it hasn't changed from the days of AIX and HPUX?
So the ebb and flow of mainframe to personal computer keeps going back and forth. And the survey cites that we did stuff more in the cloud for security operations. In order to do that, we need to implement a whole bunch of new systems. If you want to be the best in the market, you need to innovate and you need to be able to produce software. You will be last to market if the thing works perfectly.
True.
So the economic factors that are compelling people to do things in the market say you need to be fast, move fast and break things. And so then if you have a circumstance where people don't fully understand the technology that they're deploying, and they're deploying before that sort of alignment that I discussed to where there's adequate inspection, preparation, and monitoring and contingency plans. If you don't have that, you're still going to the cloud. Doesn't matter because that's what you have to do to either keep up or catch up or move out or whatever. That's why it's continuing, is that the economic factors don't allow us the time to really do exceptional engineering of our information systems. Because at the moment, it's an exception.
Right,
It would be
that is an
exception.
excellent point. Absolutely. And to that point, your survey found that cloud-based SOC is now more common than a single central SOC as an architecture. So is there any upside to that shift? Is there anything that will help about that?
For all the same reasons that moving things to the cloud is beneficial for IT operations, lower cost, offloading of operational components, a security operations center gains the benefit of that proposal. This is better for us. For some of the same reasons, we have to be extremely careful about the data that goes into the assets that are owned and managed by other people. That's important. We also need to be aware of the fact that those administrative utilities are basically controlling what we're using, and the updates and pushes to things might actually be a real downside for us, where if something changes and they change it as an underlying infrastructure and we haven't caught up or our configurations haven't been maintained to the newer specification, and things that we thought worked no longer work because the specific function or command that we chose to implement is now deprecated in the newer version. Mm-hmm. That's a big downside.
Yeah. I've heard the phrase, there is no cloud, it's just someone else's computer.
Someone else's computer, for sure. And the nice thing about that is if it's someone else's computer, it's not your responsibility. And the bad problem is when it's someone else's responsibility and you can't get them to do it the way that you want them to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So some people see AI as hope for these time-honored SecOps problems in a way that people can finally keep up. Mm-hmm. But your survey found a declining opinion of AI and machine learning among respondents. So why do you think that is?
Yeah, so I called that out specifically since it's such a hot topic. The pattern that reminds me of is what people will call the hype cycle.
Yeah.
And if you're maintaining sort of a longer term perspective, you'll realize that we've had artificial intelligence and machine learning capabilities and algorithms for decades, and that the OpenAI release captured the public visibility. It was a tremendous thing. The work that allows that sort of generative pre-trained transformer and large language model stuff is not that old. This is something that it's 2016, 2017 timeframe for the stuff that started allowing the audio encoders to be built to then sort of move into these generative tools. And then the other thing is, of course, the advancing hardware capability for that. All this stuff came to a culmination a couple of years ago, and I think that we're at that point, and this is a trend that has been observed for lots of new technologies, and I'm just sort of calling out that at this point, it looks like we're starting to hit a dip where people in cybersecurity are saying, that thing does some really cool stuff, but it doesn't necessarily do all of what I want it to do, and it doesn't really solve my problems.
Right.
And so now where we have this vendor-included obligation almost to say, with AI, now we have to figure out what that is. Is that going to help us or is it going to hurt us? Does that diminish our security posture or is that leaking our intellectual property? So a lot of people are like, this is great, but Now I have way more work to do to figure out how to use and leverage this new tool. Personally, for the last couple of years, I've been really working more on the machine learning algorithm side stuff to be able to understand it. But for years, I've been tracking the machine learning as a concept and technologies that have been available to us. So I think that that's what's happening right now. That's what I'm observing. I do plan next year to actually ask questions at a far more granular level related to AI and ML. And there's a downside to the survey. It is extremely long. It is extremely detailed. People spend an hour to answer it on average. I cite that stat to explain the value of this. So you're also getting folks who are dedicated and committed, but I am missing the people who this is all I know. ChatGPT is all I know. It does everything I need. But the problem is, does that really provide excellent sort of inspection for us? And we don't really know that yet.
True. Ultimately, do you think AI or more sophisticated automation will help improve SecOps and help humans keep up with these increasingly complex systems?
Yeah, without a doubt. Okay. And I think that the concepts of what we'll do with it are, we'll implement some stuff. It'll have some machine learning trained detection capability in it. And we won't know any different. It doesn't matter to us that it's like, oh, I found that one because it's this particular sort of a distinction. I think that there are a bunch of organization approaches that will also be, okay, here's a tool that somebody else has provided to us where now we can tune and tailor. I don't need to go into the algorithms, but I can leverage the algorithms to adjust them to my own needs. And then I think that we'll still have a set of diehard, I will do it myself, I will build the thing, I will train on my data, I will revise on my data kind of approach. And I think that there's enormous opportunities for consolidation, but I also think that there remains great opportunities for people understanding how the math works and then leveraging that math on data sets that it probably doesn't make sense to push out to some third party to review it and learn from it.
Right. So in general, how would you grade the state of SecOps, and what do you think it'll take to improve it?
As a generalization, it's pretty hard for me to sort of grade that. Across the technology, I actually use grades like A, B, C, D to characterize it. For SecOps, it's way better than it was 20 years ago. 20 years ago, we didn't have Microsoft Patch Tuesday. And I use that as an example on the maturity of the industry. And attackers are getting better. But I actually think that organizations now have funding and they have a mandate to do security and security operations. I think that mandate comes in many different forms, either legal compliance or other things, but that's really where we are now. And the other thing is there's a relatively huge population of people who are knowledgeable in cybersecurity compared to 20 years ago. That didn't exist.
True.
And so what's the state? It's getting better, and it has been getting better. What's the challenge? There's a lot of ongoing difficulty and expansion, and we don't feel like we are getting better because there are lots of additional problems. But I do think we're getting better. And that's one of the reasons why I also try to look at trends. It's kind of hard for me to do that, but I've frozen some of those questions year over year to try to be able to do some trending in the survey output.
What I hear a lot about is the increasing number, magnitude, and cost of ongoing cyber attacks and data breaches. Even big companies like Microsoft have experienced some really painful security incidents. And I just wonder, what will it take, or is it practical to expect that same old story of breaches getting larger and more severe and growing each and every year will flatten out at some point, if not decline? Is there hope that equation's possible?
I'm an eternal optimist, so I would say, of course, there's hope.
Okay.
I also think that the cybersecurity problems that we have are narrow in terms of things that are deployed in the world. But but they actually have global cascading impact when cybersecurity doesn't work properly, whether that's our own operational interruptions or it's something that there's a massive compromise that disrupts the economic or geopolitical status quo. There's massive cascading impact. So what I think, and this is a prediction, and as you know, experts are notoriously bad at predictions. What I think will happen is that there will be pockets of stability and pockets of instability in information systems. And there will be an extremely long tail of assets which won't be secure. They'll continue to cause a problem. And I use sort of a physical analogy for it, and it's space junk.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, we've been launching stuff into Earth orbit for a while, and the residue causes problems for us and our more advanced capabilities that we would like to deploy. So the point where it starts to improve is when we, as a race of humans, decide that we need to clean some stuff up and get it to where it's like we have chosen what sort of information systems are suitable for us. That's the inflection point where things really start getting better, in my opinion. And I don't have a proposed date for that in my prediction.
Sure. Although it has been pointed out to me that software engineering as an engineering discipline is still fairly young. And so there is the possibility that it could become more standardized in the way that other engineering disciplines have.
I agree with that absolutely. And the way that I would say that is we don't have a material science yet for information. And material science is a centuries-old practice of how do we build things. Right. And so we actually have material science where we can speculate the durable lifespan of an object, like a building made out of concrete versus a building made out of poplar. Mm-hmm. But we don't have material science on the durable lifespan of something made in, I don't know, remembering back to when I was a kid in my first job in computers, something made out of like a Ultrix system. And what's the durable lifespan when I deploy that? Well, there's some concept, but I can't actually engineer to that because I don't know.
Right. Alrighty. So anything else that you want to talk about as far as the security operations picture?
I don't think so.
Okay.
There's a lot of detail in the SOC survey. Mm-hmm. I would really encourage people to read it. Mm-hmm. I would also encourage people to take me up on the offer of doing some derivative analysis. I've made some things available, and I have a reference in there on how to do that. Mm-hmm. I don't want to go into all the details now, but basically it's a data set and a Jupyter Lab notebook to basically get you started.
Great.
So if people are into that, they can check my work.
Cool. Yeah. I hope people take you up on that. And in the meantime, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us.
It's great. Thank you very much.
This has been IT Ops Query Season 2, The State of SecOps. If you have any feedback on this episode or want to share questions, comments, or stories we should consider covering, please reach out to me at B as in boy, P as in Peter, A-R, I, S as in Samuel, E-A-U at techtarget.com. Please consider rating, reviewing, and subscribing to this podcast on your platform of choice. And tune in next week for our continued conversations with industry experts about the challenges facing security operations. Thank you for being with us so far.